The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Leatherneck in Afghanistan as Marine Corps Lance Corporal Sarah Martinez adjusted her gear one final time. She had been in country for 8 months now, and the routine of checking equipment had become second nature. Her hands moved with practiced precision over her body armor, ammunition pouches, and medical kit. Today felt different, though, and she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her stomach since Reveille. Sarah wasn't supposed to be here. 3 years ago, she had been working at a coffee shop in Phoenix, Arizona, saving money for college and wondering what direction her life would take. Everything changed the day she met Corporal James "Jimmy" Rodriguez at her younger brother's graduation party. Jimmy was home on leave, still wearing his dress blues, and when he talked about serving his country, something ignited inside Sarah that she had never felt before. Her family thought she was crazy when she announced her decision to enlist. Her mother cried for days, begging her to reconsider. Her father, a construction worker who had never served in the military, didn't understand why his daughter would choose such a dangerous path when she had so many other options. But Sarah had made up her mind. She wanted to make a difference, to be part of something bigger than herself. Boot camp at Parris Island had been the hardest thing she had ever done. The drill instructor seemed determined to break her spirit, but Sarah refused to quit. She thought about Jimmy's stories, about the Marines who had served before her, and she pushed through every challenge. When she finally earned her Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, she felt a pride that nothing else in her life had ever given her. Now, walking across the dusty compound toward the motor pool, Sarah reflected on how much she had grown since that scared girl had first stepped off the bus at Parris Island. She had completed advanced combat training, learned to handle weapons she had never imagined touching, and discovered reserves of strength and courage she didn't know she possessed. Her fellow Marines had become her second family, and she would do anything to protect them. The mission briefing had been routine. Their convoy would be escorting supplies to a forward operating base about 40 miles northeast of their current position. Intelligence reports suggested minimal enemy activity in the area, but Sarah knew that in Afghanistan things could change in an instant. She had seen too many routine missions turn deadly to ever let her guard down completely. As she approached her vehicle, Sarah noticed Private First Class David Chen checking the undercarriage for improvised explosive devices. Chen was 19 years old, barely out of high school, and this was his first deployment. Sarah had taken him under her wing from the moment he arrived at their unit. Something about his nervous energy and eagerness to prove himself reminded her of herself when she first arrived. "Everything look good, Chen?" Sarah asked, setting her pack down beside the Humvee. "Yes, Lance Corporal. All clear," Chen replied, his voice carrying the slight tremor that still appeared whenever he was nervous. "I triple-checked everything, just like you taught me." Sarah smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "Good man. Remember, stay alert out there today. I know intel says it's quiet, but we don't take any chances. You stick close to me, and we'll all get home safe." The convoy consisted of 6 vehicles carrying essential supplies and equipment to the remote outpost. Sarah's vehicle was third in line, positioned where she could provide covering fire if needed while also protecting the supply trucks behind them. She had requested this position specifically because it allowed her to keep an eye on Chen, who was still learning the ropes of convoy operations. As they rolled out of the gates of Camp Leatherneck, Sarah felt the familiar mix of adrenaline and anxiety that came with every mission outside the wire. The landscape of Afghanistan always struck her as both beautiful and ominous. The rugged mountains in the distance looked like something from a postcard, but she knew that danger could be hiding behind any rock formation or in any seemingly innocent village they passed. The first hour of the journey passed without incident. The convoy maintained proper spacing, and the Marines remained vigilant, scanning their assigned sectors for any signs of trouble. Sarah found herself thinking about home, about the letters she had received from her family the previous week. Her mother was still worried, of course, but she had finally begun to express pride in her daughter's service. It was Chen who first spotted the suspicious activity. "Lance Corporal Martinez," he said quietly into his radio. "I've got movement on the ridge line, about 300 meters to our 2 o'clock. Sarah immediately focused her attention on the area Chen had indicated. Through her binoculars, she could see what appeared to be several figures moving among the rocks. They were too far away to make out clearly, but their movements seemed deliberate and coordinated. This wasn't normal civilian activity. "Good eyes, Chen," Sarah whispered back. "Keep watching them, but don't stare. We don't want to let them know we've spotted them." She quickly reported the sighting to the convoy commander, who acknowledged the information and ordered all vehicles to increase their vigilance. The convoy continued moving, but the tension level had noticeably increased. Sarah could feel her heart rate picking up as she scanned the surrounding terrain for additional threats. The attack, when it came, was swift and devastating. The lead vehicle had just rounded a bend in the road when the first rocket-propelled grenade streaked down from the ridgeline. The explosion sent the Humvee sliding sideways into a drainage ditch, and immediately the radio crackled with calls for medical assistance and situation reports. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. While the convoy commander coordinated the response and called for backup, she grabbed her medical kit and prepared to dismount. The wounded Marines in the lead vehicle needed immediate attention, and she was one of the unit's certified combat lifesavers. "Chen, you stay with the vehicle and maintain security," she ordered as she prepared to move forward under fire. "Keep your eyes on that ridgeline and call out any movement you see." "But Lance Corporal, shouldn't I come with you?" Chen asked, his voice tight with fear and adrenaline. "Negative. Your job is to protect our sector and provide covering fire if needed. I'm counting on you to watch my back while I help our wounded Marines." As Sarah prepared to leave the relative safety of her vehicle and move through the kill zone toward the damaged lead Humvee, she had no way of knowing that this decision would change everything. The young woman from Phoenix who had enlisted to make a difference was about to face the ultimate test of her courage and commitment to her fellow Marines. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions along the ridgeline as Sarah sprinted toward the overturned lead vehicle. Bullets kicked up small explosions of dirt around her feet, but she kept her focus on the Marines who needed her help. Her medical training had taught her that the first few minutes after an injury were often the difference between life and death. Sergeant Mike Thompson, the vehicle commander, was trapped in the driver's seat with blood streaming down his face from a deep gash on his forehead. In the passenger seat, Corporal Lisa Williams was conscious but clearly disoriented from the blast. Most critically, Lance Corporal Tony Valdez had been thrown partially from the vehicle and was lying motionless on the ground beside the Humvee. "Thompson, can you hear me?" Sarah shouted over the noise of gunfire as she slid into cover behind the damaged vehicle. "Yeah, I'm okay," Thompson replied, though his voice was weak. "Check on Valdez first." He took the worst of it. Sarah quickly assessed Valdez's condition. He was unconscious with a severe head injury and what appeared to be internal bleeding. His breathing was shallow and irregular, and his pulse was weak and rapid. Without immediate medical intervention, he would not survive the journey back to the base hospital. Working with practiced efficiency despite the chaos around her, Sarah began emergency treatment. She established an airway, started an IV line, and applied pressure bandages to control the bleeding. All the while, enemy fire continued to rain down on their position, and she could hear the convoy's return fire growing more intense as more Marines joined the fight. "Chen, I need you to call for immediate medical evacuation," Sarah radioed back to her vehicle. "We've got 1 urgent surgical and 2 routine casualties. Give them our grid coordinates and tell them we're taking effective fire from elevated positions." "Roger, Lance Corporal. Already on it," Chen replied, and Sarah could hear the pride in his voice despite the dangerous situation. The young Marine was performing his duties with confidence that had been building throughout their deployment. While waiting for the medical helicopter, Sarah continued treating the wounded Marines. She managed to stabilize Valdez enough to keep him alive, helped Thompson bandage his head wound, and treated Williams for a probable concussion. The convoy's heavy weapons teams had located the enemy positions and were returning devastating fire, gradually suppressing the attack. 20 minutes after the initial ambush, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors could be heard approaching from the south. The medical evacuation aircraft would need to land in an open area about 200 meters from the convoy's position, which meant moving the casualties across ground that was still occasionally receiving enemy fire. "We need to move them now," Sarah told Thompson, who had recovered enough to help with the evacuation. "The longer that bird stays on the ground, the more danger everyone's in." Thompson nodded and grabbed one end of the improvised stretcher they had constructed for Valdez. Sarah took the other end, and together they began the dangerous journey to the landing zone. Williams was able to walk with assistance from another Marine who had moved up to help. They had covered about half the distance when Sarah noticed movement in the rocks above them. A lone enemy fighter had worked his way around to a position where he could target the landing zone with a rocket-propelled grenade. If he fired at the medical helicopter, it would mean certain death for the aircrew and possibly the destruction of their only means of evacuating the wounded. Without hesitation, Sarah handed her end of the stretcher to another Marine and raised her rifle. The enemy fighter was partially concealed behind a large boulder, making him a difficult target. Sarah knew she would only have one chance to take him out before he could fire his weapon. The shot was one of the most difficult she had ever attempted. The target was over 300 meters away, positioned at an elevated angle and partially hidden behind cover. But Sarah had been one of the top marksmen in her training class, and she drew on every skill she had learned during countless hours on the rifle range. She controlled her breathing, accounted for wind and distance, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and she immediately saw the enemy fighter collapse behind the boulder. The threat to the medical helicopter had been eliminated. "Outstanding shot, Martinez," shouted Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, the convoy's senior non-commissioned officer, who had witnessed the engagement through his binoculars. The medical helicopter landed safely, and the aircrew quickly loaded the casualties aboard. Sarah gave a detailed report of the treatment she had provided to the flight medic, ensuring continuity of care during the flight to the trauma center. As the helicopter lifted off, she felt a mixture of relief and pride, knowing that her actions had helped save the lives of her fellow Marines. But the mission was far from over. The convoy still needed to complete its supply run to the forward operating base, and intelligence reports suggested that additional enemy forces might be moving into the area. The Marines quickly redistributed personnel among the remaining vehicles and prepared to continue their journey. Sarah found herself assigned to the new lead vehicle, a position that put her at greater risk, but also allowed her to use her proven skills to help navigate the remaining dangers. Chen requested permission to accompany her, arguing that he had learned valuable lessons during the firefight and wanted to continue developing his tactical skills under her mentorship. "You sure about this, Chen?" Sarah asked as they prepared to mount up. "Nobody would think less of you if you wanted to stay with one of the trail vehicles." "I'm sure, Lance Corporal. You taught me that Marines take care of each other no matter what. I want to be where I can best support the mission and learn from the best teacher I've ever had." Sarah smiled and nodded. The young Marine had proven himself during the crisis, maintaining his composure and performing his duties effectively, despite being under fire for the first time. She was proud of how much he had grown during their deployment. As the convoy prepared to move out again, Sarah took a moment to check her equipment and mentally prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had no way of knowing that their most dangerous encounter was still to come, or that her actions in the next few hours would echo far beyond the mountains of Afghanistan. The convoy rolled forward into the uncertain terrain ahead. Each Marine focused on completing their mission while staying alert for signs of additional threats. Behind them, the medical helicopter was already disappearing into the distance, carrying their wounded comrades toward safety and the advanced medical care that would save their lives. The convoy had been traveling for another hour when they reached the most dangerous part of their route. The road wound through a narrow valley between two steep ridgelines, creating what military tacticians called a natural choke point. Intelligence briefings had identified this area as a potential ambush site, but it was the only practical route to reach their destination before nightfall. Sarah studied the terrain through her binoculars as their vehicle approached the valley entrance. The rocky slopes on both sides provided countless hiding places for enemy fighters, and the narrow road would make it difficult for the convoy to maneuver if they came under attack. She could feel the tension building among all the Marines as they prepared to enter what could easily become a killing field. "Stay sharp. Everyone," came the voice of Captain Morrison, the convoy commander, over the radio. "We're entering the danger area now. Maintain proper spacing and be ready to react quickly if we take contact." Chen was manning the machine gun in their vehicle, and Sarah could see his knuckles white as he gripped the weapon. Despite his earlier display of courage, she knew that the young Marine was still processing the reality of combat. The adrenaline rush from their first firefight had worn off, and now the weight of what they had experienced was beginning to settle in. "How are you holding up, Chen?" Sarah asked quietly. "I keep thinking about Valdez," Chen replied without taking his eyes off his assigned sector. "He looked so pale when they loaded him on the helicopter. Do you think he's going to make it?" "Tony's tough, and we got him the best medical care possible as fast as we could. That's all we can do for him now. The doctors at the trauma center have saved Marines who were hurt much worse than he was." Chen nodded, but Sarah could tell he was still struggling with seeing a fellow Marine so badly injured. She remembered her own first experience with combat casualties during training exercises, and how unprepared she had felt despite all her medical training. The reality of treating wounded friends under fire was something that no amount of classroom instruction could fully prepare someone for. As they moved deeper into the valley, Sarah noticed that the radio chatter had decreased significantly. All the Marines were focused on their assigned sectors, scanning for any signs of enemy activity. The silence was broken only by the rumble of engines and the occasional crackle of radio checks between vehicles. It was Chen who first spotted the improvised explosive device buried in the road ahead. His training in identifying suspicious objects had improved dramatically since their deployment began, and something about the freshly disturbed earth caught his attention. "Stop the convoy," Chen shouted into his radio. "Possible IED in the road about 50 meters ahead of the lead vehicle." The convoy immediately halted, and Sarah grabbed her binoculars to get a better look at what Chen had spotted. Sure enough, she could see the telltale signs of recently disturbed soil and what appeared to be a pressure plate trigger mechanism partially concealed beneath loose gravel. "Good catch, Chen," Sarah said with genuine admiration. "That could have taken out our entire lead vehicle." The convoy's explosive ordnance disposal specialist, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Hayes, dismounted from one of the trail vehicles and began making her way forward to assess the threat. Hayes was a veteran of multiple deployments and had disarmed dozens of IEDs during her career. If anyone could safely clear the device, it was her. While Hayes worked, the rest of the Marines established a security perimeter around the convoy. Sarah positioned herself where she could provide overwatch for the EOD operation, while also keeping an eye on the surrounding terrain. The valley walls seemed to press in around them, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. 20 minutes later, Hayes had successfully disarmed the explosive device. But as she was preparing to rejoin the convoy, Sarah noticed movement on the ridgeline above them. Through her scope, she could see at least a dozen enemy fighters positioning themselves for an attack. Unlike the earlier ambush, this one appeared to be much more carefully planned and coordinated. "We've got company," Sarah reported over the radio. "Multiple enemy personnel on both ridgelines. This looks like a prepared ambush position." Captain Morrison quickly assessed the situation and made the decision to fight their way through, rather than attempt to retreat back through the narrow valley. The convoy was carrying critical supplies that were needed at the forward operating base, and intelligence suggested that enemy reinforcements were moving to block their withdrawal route. "All vehicles, prepare to move on my command," Morrison ordered. "We're going to punch through fast and hard. Gunners, engage targets of opportunity on both flanks." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she prepared for what would likely be the most intense firefight of her deployment. The enemy had chosen their position well, and the Marines would be exposed and vulnerable as they moved through the valley. Success would depend on speed, accurate return fire, and a little bit of luck. The attack began the moment the convoy started moving again. Rocket-propelled grenades streaked down from both sides of the valley, and automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. The lead vehicle immediately began returning fire while maintaining maximum speed through the kill zone. Sarah's vehicle was taking heavy fire from a machine gun position about halfway up the left ridgeline. She could see muzzle flashes among the rocks and knew that the enemy gunner had a clear field of fire on their route. If they didn't neutralize that position quickly, it would be able to engage every vehicle in the convoy. "Chen, target that machine gun position at 11 o'clock, about 200 meters up the slope," Sarah instructed while taking aim with her own rifle. Chen swung his weapon around and began laying down suppressive fire on the enemy position. His accuracy had improved dramatically since their deployment began, and Sarah could see his rounds impacting close to the target. But the enemy fighters were well protected behind stone fortifications, and it would take precise fire to eliminate them. Sarah carefully aimed at what appeared to be the enemy machine gunner's position and fired. Her round struck the rocks near the target, sending fragments flying but not achieving a direct hit. She adjusted her aim and fired again, this time seeing the enemy weapon go silent. "Target down," Chen shouted triumphantly, but his celebration was cut short as more enemy positions opened fire from further up the valley. The convoy was now fully committed to fighting its way through the ambush. Each vehicle was engaging multiple targets while maintaining maximum speed on the treacherous mountain road. The noise was deafening, with the sound of gunfire echoing off the valley walls and mixing with the roar of diesel engines pushed to their limits. As they approached the narrowest part of the valley, Sarah could see that the enemy had positioned their strongest defensive positions to block the exit. Several large boulders had been moved to create a partial roadblock, forcing the convoy to slow down and navigate carefully around the obstacles. This would be where the enemy would concentrate their fire for maximum effect. As the convoy approached the improvised roadblock, Sarah could see the tactical situation deteriorating rapidly. The enemy had concentrated their most experienced fighters at this choke point, and their fire was becoming increasingly accurate and coordinated. The lead vehicle was taking heavy damage, with bullet holes appearing in the armor plating and smoke beginning to pour from the engine compartment. "Lead vehicle is hit hard," came the urgent radio call from Sergeant Peterson, the vehicle commander. "We're losing power and taking on a lot of damage. Not sure how much longer we can maintain forward momentum." Captain Morrison made a quick tactical decision that would prove crucial to the convoy's survival. "Vehicle 2, move up and take the lead. Vehicle 1, fall back to second position and try to maintain mobility." Sarah's vehicle suddenly found itself at the front of the convoy, directly facing the heaviest enemy fire. The responsibility of leading the other Marines through the ambush now rested squarely on their shoulders. Sarah could feel the weight of that responsibility, knowing that every decision made in the next few minutes could mean the difference between life and death for her fellow Marines. Chen was performing magnificently under pressure, engaging multiple targets with short, controlled bursts that conserved ammunition, while maintaining effective suppressive fire. His transformation from nervous recruit to confident Marine warrior had been remarkable to witness, and Sarah felt a surge of pride in how far he had come. The roadblock consisted of 3 large boulders arranged to force vehicles into a narrow S-curve that would slow them down and expose them to concentrated fire from elevated positions. Sarah could see enemy fighters positioned behind reinforced fighting positions on both sides of the passage, their weapons trained on the exact path the convoy would have to take. "Driver, we need to punch through that gap as fast as possible," Sarah instructed Lance Corporal Jake Morrison, the convoy commander's younger brother who had volunteered for the dangerous assignment. "Don't slow down for anything. If we get stuck in that kill zone, we're done for." Morrison nodded grimly and downshifted the heavily armored vehicle, preparing for what would essentially be a high-speed run through concentrated enemy fire. The engine roared as he accelerated toward the gap, while Sarah and Chen concentrated their fire on the enemy positions flanking their route. The intensity of enemy fire increased dramatically as they entered the roadblock area. Bullets struck their vehicle with a sound like deadly hail, and Sarah could hear the distinctive crack of rounds passing close to her head. A rocket-propelled grenade exploded against the rocks nearby, showering them with stone fragments and filling the air with choking dust. Halfway through the gap, disaster struck. An enemy fighter hidden among the boulders emerged with an RPG launcher, aimed directly at their vehicle. Sarah saw him at the same moment he prepared to fire, and she knew that at this close range, the rocket would penetrate their armor and kill everyone inside. Without thinking, Sarah threw herself forward, grabbing Chen and pushing him down into the vehicle just as the rocket streaked toward them. The explosion was devastating, lifting the rear of their Humvee off the ground and sending shrapnel tearing through the air where Chen had been standing moments before. The blast threw Sarah against the side of the vehicle with tremendous force. She felt something tear in her chest and suddenly breathing became difficult. Blood began seeping through her body armor, but she forced herself to remain focused on the mission. Chen was alive because of her quick action, and the convoy was still moving through the ambush. "Lance Corporal Martinez is hit," Chen shouted into the radio, his voice breaking with emotion. He had witnessed Sarah's heroic action and understood that she had saved his life at the cost of her own safety. "How bad?" came Captain Morrison's immediate response. Sarah tried to speak but found that her voice was weak and breathing was becoming increasingly difficult. She could taste blood in her mouth, and she knew that the shrapnel had caused serious internal injuries. But the convoy was still in the kill zone, and her Marines needed her to keep fighting. "I'm okay," she managed to say into the radio, though both Chen and Morrison could see that she was far from okay. "Keep moving. We need to get everyone through this." With tremendous effort, Sarah forced herself back to her weapon and continued engaging enemy targets. Her shots were less accurate now due to her injuries, but she kept firing to provide suppressive fire for the vehicles behind them. Each movement sent waves of pain through her body, but she refused to give up while her fellow Marines were still in danger. The convoy's lead vehicle finally broke through the roadblock and began climbing out of the valley on the far side. Behind them, the other vehicles followed in quick succession, their crews maintaining heavy fire on the enemy positions until they were out of effective range. As soon as they reached a defensible position beyond the ambush site, Captain Morrison ordered the convoy to halt so they could assess casualties and damage. Medical personnel immediately rushed to treat the wounded, with Sarah being their highest priority. Chen stayed by Sarah's side as the medics worked to stabilize her condition. The young Marine was visibly shaken by witnessing his mentor's sacrifice, and he kept repeating how sorry he was that she had been hurt protecting him. "Don't you dare apologize," Sarah whispered, gripping Chen's hand with what strength she had left. "You did everything right out there. I'm proud of you, and I'd make the same choice again without hesitation. Marines take care of each other, remember?" The medical assessment revealed that Sarah had sustained serious chest and abdominal injuries from the rocket blast. Multiple pieces of shrapnel had penetrated her body armor, causing internal bleeding and damage to several organs. The medics worked frantically to control the bleeding and stabilize her for medical evacuation. "We need immediate medical evacuation," reported Hospital Corpsman Second Class Maria Santos, the convoy's senior medic. "Lance Corporal Martinez has multiple penetrating wounds with probable internal bleeding. She needs emergency surgery as soon as possible." Captain Morrison was already coordinating with headquarters for emergency medical support. The forward operating base they had been traveling to had basic medical facilities, but Sarah's injuries required the advanced trauma center at the main base. A medical helicopter was being dispatched from Camp Leatherneck, but it would take at least 30 minutes to reach their location. While they waited for the medical evacuation, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. During her lucid moments, she could see the faces of her fellow Marines gathered around her, their expressions mixing concern with admiration for her heroic actions. She had done exactly what she had enlisted to do: protect her fellow Marines and complete the mission, no matter the personal cost. Chen never left her side during the wait, holding her hand and talking quietly to keep her conscious and alert. He told her about his family back home, about his plans after the deployment, and about how much her mentorship had meant to him. Sarah smiled weakly, knowing that she had helped shape this young man into the kind of Marine who would go on to protect and mentor others just as she had done. The medical helicopter arrived with the distinctive wop-wop sound that had become synonymous with hope for wounded Marines throughout Afghanistan. Sarah was carefully loaded onto a stretcher by the flight medic team, who immediately began advanced life support measures during the journey back to Camp Leatherneck. Chen watched helplessly as the aircraft lifted off, carrying away the Marine who had saved his life and taught him what it truly meant to serve. At the trauma center, a team of military surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the damage caused by the rocket blast. Sarah had sustained injuries to her liver, left lung, and several major blood vessels. The medical team fought valiantly to save her life, but the internal bleeding was too severe and the damage too extensive. Despite their best efforts and the most advanced medical technology available, Sarah Martinez died on the operating table at 0347 hours. The news of Sarah's death spread quickly through the Marine units stationed throughout Afghanistan. Captain Morrison had the difficult task of informing her squad members and then making the official notifications to higher headquarters. The loss of any Marine was always devastating, but Sarah's death hit particularly hard because of the circumstances surrounding her sacrifice and the respect she had earned from everyone who served with her. Chen took the news harder than anyone. He blamed himself for Sarah's death, believing that if he had been more alert or positioned differently, she wouldn't have needed to protect him. The other Marines in their unit tried to console him, explaining that Sarah had made a conscious choice to save his life and that he needed to honor that sacrifice by continuing to serve with the same dedication she had shown. The formal investigation into the ambush and Sarah's death began immediately. Military protocol required a thorough review of all actions taken during the engagement, both to identify any lessons learned that could prevent future casualties and to determine if any recognition was warranted for exceptional performance under fire. The investigation revealed that Sarah's actions had been exemplary throughout the entire mission, from her initial treatment of casualties during the first ambush to her precise marksmanship that eliminated the threat to the medical helicopter, to her final sacrifice that saved Chen's life. She had consistently placed the welfare of her fellow Marines above her own safety. Captain Morrison submitted a recommendation for Sarah to receive the Silver Star, the military's third highest decoration for valor in combat. His detailed report documented each of her heroic actions and included testimonials from every Marine who had witnessed her performance. The recommendation was enthusiastically supported by every level of command, from the battalion commander all the way up to the commanding general of Marine forces in Afghanistan. But the formal recognition process moved slowly through military bureaucracy, and Sarah's story might have remained known only to the Marines who served with her, if not for an unexpected development. Chen had been writing detailed letters to his family throughout the deployment, and his account of Sarah's heroism caught the attention of his sister, a journalism student at Northwestern University. Jennifer Chen knew immediately that Sarah's story deserved to be told to a much wider audience. She began researching military protocols for sharing such stories and reached out to several journalists who specialized in covering military affairs. Her persistence eventually connected her with Maria Rodriguez, a veteran war correspondent who had covered multiple deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Rodriguez was initially skeptical about taking on another story about military heroism, having covered many similar cases over the years. But when she read David Chen's detailed account of Sarah's actions and spoke with Captain Morrison and other members of the unit, she realized that this story was different. Sarah's sacrifice represented the very best of military service, and her leadership and mentorship had clearly made a lasting impact on the young Marines she served with. The challenge was getting permission to tell Sarah's story publicly. Military regulations strictly controlled what information could be shared about combat operations, and the Marine Corps was often reluctant to allow detailed accounts of specific engagements to be published. Rodriguez would need official cooperation to access the personnel and documentation necessary to tell the story accurately and completely. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez reached out to Sarah's family in Phoenix. Her parents, Miguel and Carmen Martinez, had been devastated by their daughter's death but were proud of the circumstances surrounding her sacrifice. They wanted the world to know what kind of person Sarah had been and how she had lived up to the highest ideals of military service. Working with the Martinez family, Rodriguez was able to obtain permission to interview the Marines who had served with Sarah. The Marine Corps, recognizing the positive nature of the story and its potential value for recruiting and morale, agreed to provide limited cooperation. With the project, the interviews revealed a picture of a remarkable young woman who had transformed from an uncertain coffee shop worker into a confident Marine leader in just a few short years. Her fellow Marines spoke about her dedication to training, her willingness to mentor newer Marines, and her unwavering commitment to the mission and her fellow service members. Chen's interview was particularly moving. The young Marine described how Sarah had taken him under her wing from the moment he arrived at their unit, teaching him not just the technical skills he needed to survive in combat, but also the values and principles that defined what it meant to be a Marine. He credited her mentorship with saving his life multiple times, not just during their final mission together. She showed me that being a Marine isn't just about following orders or carrying a weapon, Chen explained during his interview. It's about taking care of the Marines around you no matter what. She lived that every single day and she died living it too. The story was beginning to take shape, but Rodriguez knew that it needed something more to truly capture the impact that Sarah had made. She needed to understand not just what Sarah had done, but why her actions had resonated so deeply with the Marines who served with her. The answer to that question would come from an unexpected source and would ultimately determine how Sarah's story would be remembered by the world. 3 months after Sarah's death, something extraordinary began happening at military bases across the country. Marines who had heard about her story through unofficial channels started organizing memorial runs in her honor. These weren't official military events. but grassroots tributes organized by individual Marines who felt compelled to honor her sacrifice in a meaningful way. The first memorial run took place at Camp Pendleton in California, where 50 Marines gathered at dawn to run 5 miles in full combat gear. Word of the event spread through social media and military networks, and soon similar runs were being organized at bases across the United States and around the world. Each event grew larger than the last, as more Marines learned about Sarah's story and wanted to participate in honoring her memory. Sergeant First Class Michael Torres, a Marine recruiter in Phoenix who had known Sarah before her enlistment, heard about the memorial runs and decided to organize something even more significant. He reached out to the Martinez family and proposed creating a permanent scholarship fund in Sarah's name to help other young people pursue their dreams of military service or higher education. The scholarship fund caught the attention of local media in Phoenix, which led to the first public news coverage of Sarah's story. The local newspaper article was picked up by national news outlets, and suddenly Sarah's sacrifice was being discussed on television news programs and social media platforms across the country. The public response was overwhelming. Veterans organizations began inviting Sarah's family to speak at their events. High schools requested presentations about her life and service. Most significantly, Marine Corps recruiting stations reported a noticeable increase in inquiries from young women who had been inspired by Sarah's example. Rodriguez's article was finally published 6 months after Sarah's death, appearing simultaneously in several major magazines and newspapers. The story, titled "She Fell Protecting Him," the Lance Corporal who showed what it means to be a Marine, provided the first complete account of Sarah's final mission and the impact she had made on her fellow Marines. The article included interviews with more than 20 Marines who had served with Sarah, from her drill instructors at Paris Island to the members of her unit in Afghanistan. Each interview revealed another aspect of her character and leadership, painting a picture of a young woman who had embodied the Marine Corps' highest values in everything she did. Captain Morrison, who had been promoted to major by the time the article was published, provided perhaps the most insightful comment about Sarah's legacy. Lance Corporal Martinez understood something that it takes some Marines years to learn. She knew that our strength doesn't come from our weapons or our training. It comes from our willingness to sacrifice for each other. She lived that principle every day, and she died proving it. The article's publication triggered an even larger wave of tributes and memorial events. The annual Marine Corps birthday celebrations that year featured special ceremonies honoring Sarah at bases around the world. Marine units began incorporating her story into their leadership training programs, using her example to teach young Marines about the importance of mentorship and selfless service. Chen, who had completed his deployment and returned to the United States, became one of the most requested speakers at these events. He had overcome his guilt about Sarah's death and instead focused on sharing the lessons she had taught him. His presentations always ended with the same message: Lance Corporal Martinez saved my life, but more importantly, she showed me how to live it. The best way we can honor her memory is by taking care of each other the way she took care of all of us. The formal recognition Sarah deserved finally came through military channels. Her Silver Star was awarded posthumously in a ceremony attended by her family, her fellow Marines, and senior military leaders. The citation read in part, "Lance Corporal Martinez distinguished herself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy. Her heroic actions and ultimate sacrifice saved the life of a fellow Marine and ensured the success of her unit's mission. Her courage, leadership, and devotion to duty reflect the highest credit upon herself and the United States Marine Corps." But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The 500 Marines who had participated in various memorial runs and events in Sarah's honor decided to organize a coordinated effort to ensure that her story would never be forgotten. They created a network that tracked down every Marine who had ever served with Sarah, from boot camp through her final deployment. Each of these Marines was asked to contribute to a comprehensive memoir that would tell Sarah's complete story from multiple perspectives. The project took 2 years to complete, involving interviews, letters, photographs, and official military records. The final product was a book titled 500 Marines Remember: The Sarah Martinez Story, with all proceeds going to the scholarship fund established in her name. The book's publication marked the establishment of an annual Sarah Martinez Leadership Award, presented to one Marine each year who exemplifies the same qualities of mentorship, courage, and selfless service that Sarah had demonstrated. The award ceremony became one of the Marine Corps' most prestigious events, attended by senior leaders and Sarah's family. 5 years after her death, Sarah's impact continued to grow. The scholarship fund had provided educational assistance to more than 100 young people. Marine Corps recruiting statistics showed a sustained increase in female enlistments, with many new recruits specifically citing Sarah's story as their inspiration to serve. Chen, now a sergeant and squad leader himself, continued to share Sarah's lessons with the Marines under his command. He had married his high school girlfriend and named their daughter Sarah Maria Chen, ensuring that the Lance Corporal's memory would live on in the next generation. At the dedication ceremony for a memorial garden established in Sarah's honor at Camp Leatherneck, Major Morrison delivered remarks that perfectly captured her lasting legacy. Lance Corporal Sarah Martinez served for less than 4 years, but her impact will be felt for generations. She showed us that heroism isn't about seeking glory or recognition. It's about doing what's right, taking care of your fellow Marines and being willing to make the ultimate sacrifice when duty calls. Every Marine who serves from now on will carry a part of her story with them, and our Corps will be stronger because of it. Sarah's parents, now in their 60s, continued to attend military events and speak about their daughter's service. They had found peace in knowing that her sacrifice had meaning and that her example was inspiring others to serve. With the same dedication and courage she had shown, the coffee shop in Phoenix where Sarah had worked before, enlisting created a permanent display honoring her service. Young people who came in often asked about the Marine in the photographs, and the staff always took time to tell them about the girl who had decided to serve her country and ended up showing the world what it truly means to be a hero. Sarah Martinez had enlisted to make a difference, and in death, she had achieved something even greater than she could have imagined. Her story had become a part of Marine Corps history, inspiring thousands of current and future Marines to live up to the same standard of excellence and sacrifice that she had set through her own brief but remarkable service.